We're going to turn to Romans chapter 4. And you'll have days like this when 95% of your church doesn't show up. You'll have that. So it's going to be a few of us here this morning, but let's hear what God has to say to us and trust the Lord to minister this word to us in grace as we trust Him by faith. Romans chapter 4. This series that we've been on, and I don't know if you remember it, because I do series and sometimes they go on forever and then you forget you're in a series, but it's called Larger Than Life. And I believe religion robs us of life, and there has to be more to life than what the traditional church has been teaching. In fact, when traditional church teaches law, we showed you on one of the No Religion Zone programs about a week ago, where I showed you in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 that Paul calls the law a ministry of death, a ministry of condemnation, a ministry of death. He says a letter of the law kills. If the church is ministering law, which is do's and don'ts, Paul says that's a ministry of death. And therefore, there's no life if there's death. So, this series is called Larger Than Life, and we've gone into several things with it. But today, I'm starting another series within this series. If that makes sense. And this one is something that's been brewing in me all summer long. And it probably is going to take us the rest of the year because it's so deep, and it will show you exactly what God has mapped your life to be lived like. Let me rephrase that. Many Christians don't know how to live the Christian life. So, if we live the life that God ordained for us to have in the wrong way, it becomes death. People get spiritually burned out, people give up, people want to walk away. And they think they're walking away from God, but in essence, they're walking away from religion. Because religion is what's keeping them from God. And if we don't understand and live out life the way God ordained it, not by law and not by rules, but by something greater than that. I mean, what's greater than law? Law keeps everybody in check. I mean, that keeps us from chaos. But God says no. That was the old covenant. It worked for a while. It had glory. In fact, in Hebrews, Paul says it had glory. But God says there's a better way than law. There's a better way than religion. And He says in Hebrews it's greater glory. The old covenant had promises. But the new covenant, this new way of living, and that's what Hebrews 9 calls it, or 8, a new and living way. This new way of living has its greater glory and better promises. And if the church doesn't know how to live out the new covenant, grace, then they're going to end up back in death. And then you get religion, you get people burned out, you get people with frustrated lives. So this is a series within the series. There's so much. It's why I think it's going to take us the rest of the year. And all today is, and I'm going to be short because I want you to get the gist of this. But today is an introduction to a series of messages. Like I said, it's probably going to take us to the rest of the year. And it's going to be good. This is the new covenant at its best, and it will produce life for you, abundant life. Jesus said, I come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. All right, so let's start off this introduction to this series of messages in Romans chapter 4. And let's look at verse 16. I promise you, when we're done, or even as we're going through this, I promise you that you will completely be fired up for your life in God like you've never had before. And if not, then there is no other way. Then I don't know what to tell you. Because this is, you'll see how close we stay to the Bible in this to show you we're right on task here. Romans chapter 4, verse 16. Paul says, it is of faith. Now, I don't have time to develop the whole chapter, so I'm just going right smack into the middle of it. But watch this, and underline it if you will. Therefore, it is of faith. This life God ordained for us to live is a life of faith. Okay, let me go to the next chapter. Go to 5. Look at verse 2. By whom also we have access by faith into this grace, this unmerited favor of God, this blessing of God. Can you imagine? God is out to do you good. He's not going to do you any harm. He's got so much for you. It's called favor. That's what grace is, unmerited favor. And he says it is accessed, again, chapter 5, verse 2, look at it there. It's accessed by faith. So let me ask the question, what's the opposite of faith? And you'll know exactly how to interpret this. What's the opposite of faith? Faith is believing something. It's asking you to believe something, not asking you to do something. The opposite of faith is works. Either God's got you working or God's got you believing. Huh? I don't know. Go to Romans chapter 4. Just shoot over here and look at 4. And this is what I want to show you here, because we're not done with verse 16. Chapter 4 says, what shall we say, verse 1, what shall we say then that Abraham, our father, not his father, not their father, he's talking to Gentiles here. He's not talking to Jews. It would include the Jews. He says, what did Abraham, our father, as pertaining to the flesh, find? That it's not by works. You can just read verse 2, 3, 4, and you'll see that it's not by works, but it's by faith. All the way from verse 1 all the way to verse 5, it's by faith. Verse 6, look at the last part. God imputes righteousness apart from works. You see that? Underline that. Apart from works. Without works. You can say whatever you want there. It's in different translations. King James says without works. Alright? But it also is without works, apart from works, meaning faith. So if God's not asking you to work, then the only alternative is God asking you to believe. So who's performing here? The one who's asking you to believe. Not you. You don't perform. Now watch. Go back to 4:16. Chapter 4:16. Now watch this. I'm developing something. This is all an introduction. If you don't get this, this is the key to understanding the rest of the scriptures or the rest of the messages the rest of the year. Right here. Today's message is the key to unlock the rest of the messages from this point to the end of the year, if we go that far. Chapter 4, verse 16. Therefore it is of faith. Now watch. That it might be by grace. Let that sink in.
What sink in?
Verse 16. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace. I'm going to help you understand that. If you don't get this, then the rest of the messages, the rest of the year is not going to make sense. Grace is unmerited favor, right? Circle that. I'm going to make this as simple as possible. Grace is unmerited favor. If I have to work to earn any of it, it ceases to be faith. It ends up being works. Now look at that verse again. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace. If you want to go after this thing by works, it ceases to be unmerited favor. It ceases to be grace. Now, you see that there? Now watch, read the rest. To the end, the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only, which is of the law, but to that which is also of the faith of Abraham. That includes the Gentiles and the Jews. That it might be by a promise. Now underline promise. Or circle it. I'm circling it. So in verse 16, I got 3 words circled. Romans 4, verse 16, I got 3 words circled. Faith, grace, promise. What if I told you that is all that is the only thing God's doing in your life? Those 3 words. What if everything in your life is about faith, grace, and promise? Now, I know you're not going to get this right off the bat, so your mind's probably thinking, so I'm going to give you time to, and that's what the rest of these sermons are going to do, these teachings. Because when you understand faith, grace, and promise, this is too good to be true. Religion does not teach faith, grace, promise. What's the opposite of faith? Law or works. What's the opposite of grace? Law. And what's the opposite of promise? I wish I had my board here. I tried to set it up this morning. You see it over there, that white board, because I could write this out and you'd see it. But the minute I stuck that white board up here, those cameras went to that white board and made everything else black. So I can't. It reads the board and nothing else, because cameras hate white. You ever know that? They just hate white. If you got something really white, when we were in television, and I worked for Christian television, white was a no-no. We told our guests when they showed up on, do not wear white. When that light hits that white, that camera is going to do nothing but read that white, and everything else is going to get dark. So I can't do that. So you're going to have to visualize this, or get a piece of paper and do what I'm telling you to do, or circle these words. Now we're teaching today. What's the opposite of faith? We're looking at chapter 4, verse 16. Therefore it is of faith that it might be of grace to the end of the promise. So you got 3 words there. Faith, grace, promise. Opposite of faith, works. Opposite of grace, law. Opposite of promise, commandments, rules, regulations. What's the church teach mostly? Works, law, commandments. Not faith, grace, promise. Now just that, we could go home right now and most people are like, oh my God, and they're set free right now. You could be set free. I wish somebody just would have said this little 5-minute ditty to me 20 years ago. And walked it out. Look how simple that was. And nobody on TV even teaches that today. What you get on TV is works, law, because if you're going to preach works, you got to have law. Law tells you what to work. And what are they going to find in the Bible to get you to work? The law, commandments. The old covenant is works, law, commandments. New covenant is grace, faith, and promise. God has not given commandments. He's given promises. Now let me read on, because I didn't really want to do that. That's just sidebar. That ain't even what I want you to look at in verse 16. That was good enough there. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace to the end of the promise might be sure to all, the seed not to them only, which is of the law, but to them which is of faith, that's Jew and Gentile, now of Abraham. Now look at that last part. Who is the father of us all. That's what I want you to see. I want you to see something that Paul is going to show us that is going to be the example and model you are to emulate the rest of your life once you get saved. Right here. Paul, he talks about Abraham in Galatians, which we're going to look at here in a little bit. He talks about Abraham in Romans. Because the whole new covenant is about one man, not Jesus. He fulfilled it. It is about Jesus. But as an example of faith, one man, Paul pulls out of all the Bible and says he's the father of us all. And it's Abraham. Why? What is the deal? And again, you're going to get the key here. What is the deal about Abraham in verse 16 that is going to explain to us faith, grace, and promise? Now there are 4 words in verse 16 I want you to underline or circle. And and if you don't have a Bible and you're not seeing this, I don't get how you're going to get it. I just don't. Maybe you're super. Let me look at it again. 4 words now in verse 16. Faith, grace, promise. How am I going to understand you know what? I got to go to work Monday. I got bills to pay at the end of the month. I have a complicated relationship. I got rebellious teenagers. I got a wife who just left me. I'm going through divorce. How is this going to help me? I'm going to show you. Verse 16 has it all. 4 words. Faith, grace, promise. Those 3 words are going to help you in every single problem of your life, every aspect, even aspects of your life that aren't problems. Did he put that fan in right? Is it blowing on you?
Yeah.
Or do you go backwards with it?
That's right.
All right. Just want to make you feel comfortable. 3 words. Faith, grace, promise. What's the opposite of faith? You're lucky we're not in school. I'd take a ruler right now and smack all your wrists. I just sit there and develop this. What's the opposite of faith? Works. Write that down. Works. It's not works. So when you leave here, I'm not going to tell you to do something like most Christianity will do. Do this, don't do that. You want God to do this, you got to do that. No. He says it's faith, not works. What's the opposite of grace? Law. So I ain't putting no law on you, and neither is God. What's the opposite of promise? Commandments. So I'm not going to give you a bunch of things of thou shalt and thou shalt nots. Okay? So what's the 3? Faith, grace, promise. How am I going to understand those 3 things? By the life of Abraham, which is the 4th thing you are to circle there. So faith, grace, and promise can only be understood by one man Paul pulls out of the Bible and calls him the Father of you. Did you know he was your father? Not your heavenly Father. He's considered Abraham, considered the father of faith. This whole thing is a faith. And if you're a faith, you're a child of Abraham. Do you see that there? So what I want you to see is, Paul ain't just playing games here. He's saying you're going to understand the life that God now calls us to, which is faith, grace, according to promises, not commandments, not works, not law, but faith, grace, and promise. And Abraham is the model of that faith. His life is going to teach you how to live by faith, grace, and promise. That's good stuff, even if I do say so myself. Go to Galatians chapter 3. Galatians chapter 3. I hate religion. I hate it. I just sat down with a friend over breakfast yesterday morning. He was telling me about church. Man, I just thank God I have been delivered from religion. I cannot believe the horror stories and the stuff that's being Now, you say, well, what makes you think you're right? Did you just not read the Bible there? What am I reading out of? Book of Mormon? Maybe it's that Tony Robbins, some motivational book I picked up. Maybe that's... No. It's the Bible. Galatians chapter 3. Isn't that motivational guy, Tony Robbins? Yeah? All right. Chapter 3 of God. I want to show you something here, because when I'm done with this, you're going to have a whole new lease on life. I promise you. You're going to see this thing totally different. And this is the introduction to the rest of the messages of the rest of the year. This is the key that unlocks the rest of them. Galatians chapter 3, verse 7. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith, not they which are of works, the same are who? Children of Abraham. If you're children of Abraham, that makes him what? Your father. I mean, think about this. I don't understand this, but think about this. Jesus said, don't call nobody your father. You only have one Father, which is in heaven. Paul comes and says, Abraham's my father. He's not my earthly father. He's not my heavenly father. He is the father of the new covenant. How? Because you think the Old Testament is the law of Moses. The Mosaic law. It didn't start till Exodus. But Genesis, there's other covenants. There's the Abrahamic covenant, there's the Noahic covenant, there's the Adamic covenant, there's even the Davidic covenant. So Abraham, the life of Abraham, between him and God was called the Abrahamic covenant, and it was a foreshadow of the new covenant that we have today. And that's why Abraham is our father of faith. So I think if you're going to understand this life, which he calls it a life of faith, therefore it is of faith that it might be grace, according to promise, then I think we need to look at the life of Abraham, who is your father, because you're his children, if you're of faith. Read on, verse 8. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, meaning God would never ever hold your sins against you ever again. Justification means he treats you as if you've never sinned. And how does he do that? By faith. He preached this to Abraham, saying that all peoples are going to be blessed in you, Abraham. So then, verse 9, they which be of faith, right? Be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. So you are blessed with Abraham if you're of faith. If you're of works, what happens if I'm of works? Okay, read on chapter 3 and look at verse 17. I think it's 17. 13. Look at verse 13. Same chapter. Well, I don't want to be faith. I like works. All right, well, let's look what happens to works. Christ redeemed us from the curse of works. Can I say that? Does it actually say that, though? Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law. What does law do? It demands what? Works. Christ redeemed us from works. Why? Because if you go by the way of works, you come under a curse. Being made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree. That, now here it is, verse 14, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles, that's you and me. How? Through Jesus Christ, that we might receive what? Promise. How do we receive promise? Through faith. I could go on and on and on. I don't think those two scriptures in Romans and here should be proof enough that we should be able to move on from here. It should be convincing enough. And yet I'm going to tell you something. You're going to talk to some religious zealot. They're going to talk you right back into works. And I just showed you flat out, black and white, it ain't of works. Let me give you another one. Go to Ephesians. I just want to give you another one in case I didn't get you. And look at chapter 2. Look at verse 12. He's talking about us before we got saved. That at the time ye were without Christ. Everybody here was a time in our life that we were without Christ. Being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from what? Covenant of promise. Covenants of promise. What would you say the opposite of the covenant of promise would be? The covenant of works, the covenant of law, the covenant of commandments. That's Moses. He does not give us Moses here. He gives us the Abrahamic covenant, and he calls it the new covenant, which is the covenant of promise. See that? Now I just showed you something in Romans, something in Galatians, and I just added Ephesians. I can go to Colossians and show it to you. I can go to Acts, the book of Acts, and show it to you. I can take you through the whole chapter of Hebrews 11 and show it to you. All day long. And you tell me how 98% of Christian television ends up with law, works, and commandments. I don't watch it anymore. But I used to work for Christian television for 7 years. I watched Christian. I've been in church all my life. I've been a pastor for close to 30 years. And they keep doing the same thing. Now, why aren't they preaching faith, grace, and promise as Abraham, the example? How many have needs this morning? Huh? All right, I don't want to hear your needs. That's too personal. But I want you to say some needs that you know other people have, so that you're not telling on yourself. Okay, finances. Now, what does law tell you to do if you want more money? Work for it. Get a second job. Now, I'm not saying don't work, because that's a whole other teaching. But they always got a gimmick. They always got, or hey, I got this pyramid. You need to make more money. I got this pyramid. You ever been invited to somebody's dinner? And you think, oh man, they're inviting me to dinner. This happened to me. I get invited to a dinner at this. This is church people for you. And I'm like, man. They said, what do you like to eat, Greg? I tell them the menu. Well, I'll cook it. Really? I get there. Hey, it's raining, so if you start feeling water coming through that fan, you might want to turn that off or whatever. So I get there, and I'm hungry. I'm excited about the menu, and then the fellowship I'm going to have with the people in the church. Been looking forward to it all week long. I get there, and a couple people walk in. I don't know who they are. I'm like, all right, well maybe she invited some other people over. So we have dinner, talking in there, and I'm thinking, all right, well, this is cool. We're just sharing. He goes out to his car. I think he's leaving. I don't know where he went. He comes back in with what's that thing called? Tripod or whatever that is. I put that whiteboard on. What is that? What is that called? Tripod? And he comes in with an easel. Comes in with his briefcase. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I can't think of it. What's the company years ago you have to buy their product? Amco or Amway? It was an Amway setup. It wasn't dinner. And you know what he asked me? You can always use more money, can't you? What? Who's going to say no to that? We all can use more money. It was an Amway ambush. So that was one need, right? God has an answer. It's called grace, faith, promise. How do you take, you say, Greg, that's the answer? Faith, grace, and promise is the answer to finances? Yep. Give me another need. I'm not going to tell you how, I'm setting you up. Give me another need. Healing? What? Housing? So you say you need a house right now. Maybe they're kicking you out because they're selling their house. You're renting. And you're like, oh my God. So you go to the newspaper, you go to the real estate magazine, you get on Facebook, hey, looking for a house. I mean, you're just pulling on every possible thing you can. There's an answer to your housing dilemma. Faith, grace, promise. Give me another one. Huh? Healing. Thank God for doctors. Thank God for medication. But there's an answer. There's some things medicine can't fix. You know that, right? I got a situation, and I've been told, ain't no cure for it. Same with you. No cure for what you got going on. So we screwed? Or is the answer to that dilemma and any other sickness faith, grace, promise? One more. Give me another one. Another need. Hey, let's just don't give me a need. Give me a hope, a wish. What? New car? New house? A wife? A husband? That's huge. If you're single, what do you got? You got. If you're single, you can go to the bars to find somebody. Who wants to do that? I don't think you're going to find a very good girl at a bar. If she's at a bar, what is she doing at a bar? Online dating? These are all ways and means to get something in your life you want. But what if the answer to getting a spouse is faith, grace, promise? In fact, I'll just say this. There is absolutely nothing in your life that can't get to you but by faith, grace, and everything. In fact, everything, I'll go so far as to say this. You ready for this? God will only work through faith, grace, and promise. Why would He lay it out so clearly in the New Testament and then go another way of getting things into your life? Now watch this. You don't do it God's way of faith, grace, and promise, then you're going to do it the world's way, which is find a principle, find a law, work that baby in order to get the answer. That's why self-help books are so popular. Principles and keys and secrets. 7 secrets, 2 keys. You heard me say that a zillion times. That's why those things are so popular. And you know what? You'd sit there and go, yeah, I know that. No, you don't. Because I know Christians who know this and still don't operate out of faith, grace, and promise. I know Christians have been saved for 20, 30 years and will not operate out of faith, grace, and promise. You know why? It's too hard according to the flesh. The flesh doesn't want your carnality. Your flesh will not operate through faith, grace, and promise. Because that's what Abraham's life is going to show us. The flesh will bark, scream, produce Ishmaels. That's what Abraham did. I am so excited about the messages that are going to come in the rest of the year. It's going to alter and transform your life. I promise you. If not, then I tell you what, if these messages don't do that, then quit coming here. Don't come here no more. Because I can't teach, or I'm a failure, or I'm wrong. And I'm being facetious, yeah, but I'm being serious. This is the way, the truth, and the life that Jesus talked about. This is the new covenant the Apostle Paul takes 2/3 of the New Testament to develop. But isn't it amazing? I see these Christians. And here's where I'm going to make a lot of people mad. Not here, but watching me on the internet. How come when I get an addiction, I'm told by the church to go to a 12-step program, but not go by grace, faith, and promise? Now we're going to get persecuted for preaching the truth. Huh? And I'll stand to any preacher or teacher that does this celebrate recovery, and I will take them to task on these scriptures, and you tell me how you do your celebrate recovery. It's based on faith, grace, and promise. No way. It's based on their ability to work a principle or a system or some laws or some secrets and keys or things they tell you to do to get that success, recovery, etc. But it ain't grace, faith, and promise. Do you understand that church is just hoodwinked over this celebrate recovery? It's not New Covenant. And I know I'm going to make people mad. Well, that Paul made them mad when he preached this. You think this is a popular message? You take away people's little laws. You take away their systems. You take away what they had faith in. You just pulled the carpet out from under them. Thus, it showed you what their faith was in. Those keys, principles, programs. My faith was in the program, not what Jesus did on the cross. Oh, but we preach what Jesus did on the cross, and you add on the program. You think Christ needed a program to be added to what he did on the cross? It's either a finished work, or you got to figure something out to add to it. And then get busy working whatever it is you found out to do. That you added to it, work it, and then talk about the finished work. That's hypocrisy. That's talking out of both sides of your mouth. All right, I spent too much time because I'm mad now. I just preached myself into anger. I just get so, I'm sorry, I get weary. They're never going to get it. And that's why Jesus said so many times, especially in the book of Revelation, he who has eyes to see, let him see. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Because I talk to a lot of people that just won't see. And they won't hear. And you could teach this to them and they'll walk right out there and go right back in the rut of religion. Because they're so ingrained with it. All right, here's my message. I'm done. We'll be out here by noon. He calls Abraham, and this is what I've been meditating on this summer, especially this past couple of weeks. He called Abraham the father of us all. So I want to find out. If I just said to you, Joe, and I'm telling the truth, I'm being facetious here, but I'm telling the truth. Joe is the father of us all. Now that just would wreak havoc on your life, wouldn't it? Now wait a minute, he's my father? What do you mean he's my father? And if you believed it, I got to figure out what is so big about this man. He became the father of us all. And so we're going to look at the life of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Now here's where I want you to see. God gave Abraham, and we're not going to be able to develop this, so I'm just going to give it to you. Because I've got 2 more pages of notes. I'm still on page 1 here. God gave Abraham the 10 Commandments. Right? Now, you need to listen. God did not give Abraham the 10 Commandments. So, he calls out Abraham. Now, Abraham's a heathen. He's unsaved. He's not praying to God. He's not seeking God. Someone didn't witness to him, and he gets saved, and then turns to God. Nothing. Out of the blue, out of the sky, out of the heavens, he's walking, and God starts talking to him, and he hears a voice. And he believed everything that voice said. And God said, because you had faith, you're now righteous in my sight. I don't care what evil you do or don't do. You are righteous based on your faith in me alone. That's all in Romans 4. That is in Galatians 2 and 3. That is in Romans 4, that's in Romans 5, that's in Hebrews, that's in Philippians chapter 3, verse 9. Your righteousness is by faith. So he looks up into heaven. God saved Abraham. Abraham didn't get saved in the sense that he came to God. God came to him. That's why John said, you didn't first choose God. God first chose you. God chose Abraham. And what I want you to see is, I'm going to quit playing around here with him. I'm going to just wrap this up. Does he give Abraham law? Does he give Abraham 10 commandments? He doesn't call Moses the father of us all. He gave Moses 10 commandments. He's not the father of us all. That's for another purpose, which we'll explain later down the road why God gave the law, which if you don't already know, you ought to, because we've been teaching on it all our lives here at the church. He doesn't make Moses the father of us all, who's under the 10 commandments, who gets 10 commandments, plus 600 more rules in the Old Testament. 10 plus 600. The big 10 and 600 more. He doesn't give Abraham nothing but what? Promises. If you don't get this, you've missed it. God came to Abraham and said, I have got a bunch of promises for you. And if you believe them, that's how they'll come about in your life. I'm not going to give you laws to work, secrets to obey, master plans to manipulate and work. I'm just going to come to you with promises. Why do you think it's called the covenant of promise? It's a covenant. You know what a covenant is? Two people make an oath with each other, do they not? Your marriage is a covenant. Did you not take vows? A covenant is a vow. And in Hebrews chapter 6, it says that God makes an oath to Abraham. He makes a vow and pledges his self to Abraham by these promises. This breaks the back of religion. God, now watch. If Abraham's the father of us all, and we are the children of Abraham, if I can find out how God deals with Abraham, I will exactly know how God deals with me. And it's not how the church is dealing with me. It's not how religion's dealing with me. The church, the traditional church, religious church, deals with me as if Moses was my father. You don't believe that? You know that's the truth. The next time a Christian comes to you and says, you need to do this, say, whoa, 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 Moses ain't my father. What are you giving me commandments for? Moses ain't my father. Well, you need to stop that and start, oh, whoa, I don't need to do nothing because God took away Moses. And I'm dead to the law, Romans 7. And according to Colossians chapter 2, he took that law, the 10 commandments, and nailed it to the tree with Jesus. Moses is not my father. So quit putting law on me. Rip up, you know what, you go to church and a pastor gets behind the pulpit and comes out with do this, don't do that. Stand up and say, Moses, excuse me, pastor, no disrespect, but Moses ain't my father. Why are you dealing with me according to Moses? Moses ain't my father. So if I know how God treats Abraham, I know exactly how God's going to treat me. Now, let's back up. This is kindergarten today. I'm being nice to you. I'm being very simplistic. And I'm not talking down to you. I'm just being very simple because I don't want you to miss this. This is the foundation. There's no sense in getting deep. This is a message that's going to unlock a whole New Testament to you and explain the Old Testament to you. And helps you unlock the rest of these messages the rest of this year. Okay, let's back up and I'm done. God calls Abraham. How many agree with that? Right? What does he make to him? Does he give him commandments? Remember 4:16. Grace, faith, promise, Abraham. All in verse 16 of Romans 4. There is your equation, your ingredients, your formula, whatever the hell you need to get your brain working. They're right there. So he does not call Abraham with commandments. He calls him and gives him promises. Now, Abraham's my father, and I'm a child of Abraham. What's God calling me to? Here comes the ruler. I'll pull that ruler out. What's God calling me and you to? Promises. What if, now here's where we're getting to this. I saved the best for last. What if, not what if, it is. Okay, we don't have time to look at it, but write it down in Genesis chapter 13, Genesis chapter 12, Genesis chapter 15. God gives Abraham these promises. There's a handful of them. Okay? A lot of general promises, they make him a whole lot of promises, because when he says, I'm going to bless you, my God, what is that? That would be wealth, that would be health, that would be healing, that would be protection, that would be healthy, raising your kids to obedience. And I mean, there's, when just the generality of the blessing, there's all kinds of things that come under that. So, I'm going to just pull out the key ones, not the general ones. I'm going to make you a father of many nations. Promise number 1. I'm going to give you land. Promise number 2. And you're going to be the father of many nations. You're going to get this land, and you're going to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. Then he comes and says, I am your shield, and I am your reward. And then here's the biggie. Your barren wife is going to conceive and have a child. That's not very many promises. That's a handful of major promises. That's all I pretty much get that are major. That doesn't come under the generality of blessing. Right? You follow me? His whole life consisted of those promises. So what do you mean? God called him, destined him. All he is to be concerned about in his life are those promises. He lives them. He breathes them. That's all. They become the center of his life. You mean his entire existence? Yeah, because one promise, just one promise, it took a life of 25 years of walking in faith for just one promise to come about. See, while the church has you obeying 600 laws out of the Old Testament and all their own rules, you know the church has more rules than the 600 they derive out of the Old Testament. Like this one, for instance. You can't listen to rock music. You can't listen to country music. You can only listen to Christian music. That's a rule. That's a law. You can't go to theaters. That's a law. If you go to the theaters, you're not allowed to go see certain rated movies. That's a law. Women are supposed to wear dresses. That's a law. And they've come up with their own rules. Hell, if it ain't bad enough that I got 600 from Moses, I'm going to church now and they've got their own rules. You can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do this, you can't do that. As if Christianity is based on what? Laws. Rules. Right? No! But Moses ain't my father! Abraham's my father. God does not come to me and says, do this, don't do that. He comes to me and says, Greg, I called you. I chose you. And here are the promises I'm going to perform in your life. Now, sit back, live the life of faith. Don't try to add to me. I'm the performer here, not you. And it will take a lifetime to learn how to walk by faith. Because my flesh will always want to add to, help God out, and try to go back to rules and regulations to get these promises. He says, are by grace through faith. So if I've got an addiction, the church tells me to go to celebrate recovery, but the gospel tells me go to Jesus, and He will, by grace through faith, find a promise that pertains to that addiction, and you will hold on to that by faith, and God, for faith, creates within you new drives, new desires, and you wake up, the new creation that you are, and you put away the old things, and you wake up and you got, I don't want to do that no more. I don't got to go to a group setting and hear a bunch of heartache stories to get my deliverance. And drink a bunch of coffee. And go outside and switch addictions from alcohol to cigarettes. Pornography to cigarettes, because we're going to all drink coffee and smoke cigarettes and eat sweets. Or pay a counselor because I have a DUI and I got to go to a counselor now and pay money for what? They're going to help me? I got 5 minutes. Ain't noon yet. This kid I was talking to, he's a kid, he's younger than me, but he's old. And anybody younger than me is a kid. This guy that I was having breakfast with told me that him and his wife were going through a hard time. This is one of the biggest churches in Fairmont. He goes to the pastor and says, can you counsel me? No, I don't counsel. We have a counselor on staff. All right. You have insurance? Oh, I'm getting ready to get mad again. I sat there and I said, you are pissing me off. This pastor, the biggest church in Fairmont, told you he doesn't counsel. He has a counselor on staff and you need insurance. In other words, you've got to pay her. So she can give you Moses, her rules, her steps. Oh, how we have fallen. When if that man would have done his job as a preacher and teacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ from behind the pulpit, he would have preached only grace, faith, promise, and there's your answer, buddy, to your marriage. Grace, faith, promise. What do you mean? God, find a promise. Ask God, Lord, let me give you an example. Take all the commandments in the Bible now, because it's not a covenant of works. It's a covenant of promise. Take every commandment you can find and turn it into a promise. That is your job. And that's what the New Covenant does to the Old Testament. Somebody give me a commandment. I'll show you how to work this. It's as easy as pie. Give me a commandment. Thou shalt not steal. You turn that thing around and say, God, I thank you that you have given me Jesus, and through the life of Christ, I will not steal. The new creation does not steal. My new identity doesn't even covet, let alone go out and steal. If I don't covet, I won't steal. Because God promises me a life of no stealing. Not by giving me a commandment. He gave me Jesus. He wrote Jesus on my heart, and I quit stealing. Because I have a new nature now. And I'm being transformed into the image of Jesus. From glory to glory, from faith to faith, from grace to grace. And I wake up with new drives, desires. I'm not going to go out there and quit trying to steal. I'm trusting Him to put His life in me who doesn't steal. Every commandment becomes a promise. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's a big one. Because you got it going on all the time. And so these men and women are out there, I can't cheat, I can't cheat. You're looking at it as a commandment of what not to do. Rather than saying, Lord, I thank you that the life of Christ in me does not cheat. It does not commit adultery. You wrote your law on my heart, and that says, I will not cheat. Thank you for that promise of what you're going to do in me. You're doing the transforming. He who began a good work will bring it to completion. It's no longer I who lives by command. It's Christ who lives within me, who causes me not to want to cheat. So if you wake up one day and you feel like cheating, don't go to the commandment to try not to cheat. Wait a minute, the Bible says you're not supposed to cheat because you just added fuel to that sin, because the power of sin is the law. You go to grace. You go to the promise of the life of Christ in you, the new creation, and whatever promise you can find that pertain to your need, that shows you your new identity, that shows you the life of Christ in you, that produces that life for you and through you with no effort on your part but faith. Don't go to the law to try to quit your addictions. Don't go to the law to try this, that, or the other. You go to the promise that God gives you of what He's going to do. Because He gave it to Abraham according to promise, and that's what He's giving it. Everything's promise. You guys, you just don't know what you just heard. I got saved in 1978. I didn't get, I was in church 3 times a week. I watched more Christian television than most people. I worked in it, let alone watched it. I've read and studied Bible. I've got over $10,000 worth of books in my library. Over 10,000. Every time I move, I curse those books. Boxes upon boxes upon boxes of books. So I'm a student. So I'm not just saying this. I mean what I'm saying. It took me up to the 90s, from 1978 to the early to mid 90s, before I heard this, let alone get it developed in me and it took me the next 10 to 15 years to develop it, because I was so ingrained in religion and the 10 Commandments and rules and flesh and works and all that. It's a hard transition, folks, to go from law to promise. All right, so we're done with this. So, early 90s, this guy named John Sheesby comes into my life. He's a preacher from South Africa, and he said he's teaching me the New Covenant, and our church when I had the church in Clarksburg. And I remember he's at my house and we're eating. And Zach, I don't know if you remember this or not. We went to Wendy's afterwards. He didn't feel like going someplace nice. He said we had a meeting that night. He said, let's just go get a burger. So we went through Wendy's. You were with us, and we sat at that table and we're eating. And he said to me, he said, just go to God, because I'm asking him all these questions, and they're law-based. He says, just go to God and say, God, what promises you've given me for my life? I didn't get it. I'm like, all right, but I still went back to law. Holding on to some promises, holding on to law, thinking, well, maybe if I work these law, I get these promises. No law, just promise. He performs, not me. So it took me years to develop this, and I'm going to pass what came so hard to me that you don't even get on Christian television today, and you're going to get it so easy this morning. And I'm almost mad at you for it. It's like, you're getting this so easy. How is it you get it easy, and I had blood, sweat, and tears in getting this? It's just not fair. So I'm going to give it to you easy. You were called. You were chosen before the foundation of the world with a handful of promises that are designed, tailor-made for you. That is all you are to be about. You want to know what it means to be about your Father's business? What's it mean to be about my Father's business? You hold on to those promises the Father gives you, because that's His business with you. And there are people that didn't know this. So all they know is law. That's all I knew was law. All I knew was the covenant of works. Do this, don't do that. I didn't even know you could hear God the first 10 years of my life. And I was in one of the biggest churches in Fairmont. Growing church. They never told me to hear God. They told me to obey God. They made Moses my father, not Abraham. Because listen, you've got to hear God to get the promises. So you're going to find the general promises in the Bible. All the promises of God, yes, those in Christ Jesus, 2 Corinthians 1:20. That's the general promises. That's promises you can find in the Bible. I'm the God that healeth thee. My God shall supply all my needs according to riches and glory. You can find all kinds of promises that you're to grab a hold of. I'm talking about specifics. And let me tell you something. Let's say you've got, you know what, I prayed and God gave me 3 promises. Let me tell you something. It's going to take the rest of your life for those promises to come about. They don't come about in a year. Well, I thought it was going to be a week. I've got a promise. I'm 18 years into it. How do you like that for a promise? My whole life is to be lived out in faith for one of the promises. 18 years. I got one right now, 6 years. 2 6 years, because he gave me 2 the same day, the same year. So I'm in my 7th year on 2 promises. 18 years, that's only 3 promises. My whole life is based on 3 promises, and another ones, but 3 major promises that are life-changing. And my focus every day is to be faithing in those promises. Not orient my life over here or over there. Now I know you're not going to. We're going to develop this in the weeks to come. But think of what if your life only consists not of 600 laws, but of 3 or 4 or 5 promises that God. It's called destiny. That you're destined for. That He's going to do. And why does He do it? Why did it take Abraham 25 years for one promise? Why did it take Joseph 17? It took Abraham 25 years to get a son. It took Joseph 17 years to go from that teenager to be prime minister in Egypt. 17 years. It took David, anointed king, at 18 years old. He thought he was going to be king next week. It took him 17 to 20 years to be king of Israel. Don't you think that these promises come out overnight? You know why? Because He is working faith in you. He's taking out the human faith so that you will rely on the gift of faith, His faith, and take your human out of it, your carnality out of it, which is dying on the cross to who you are, and only living out in the Spirit by faith according to what He's doing. You can't do it by the flesh. It'll take you a lifetime to do that, to get rid of your Ishmaels. What's an Ishmael? We'll develop that in the weeks to come. You don't know what that is. So I'm thinking, wait a minute. You know what? Let me tell you how this works on me. I've got my focus on a million things in life. Why? Because religion makes me do it. Culture makes me do it. Television makes me do it. Education makes me do it. I'm focused on so many things. Huh? You? You got more than you can chew? How many got? I got too many irons in the fire. You ever heard that? And what did Jesus say to Martha about her sister Mary? Martha is in the kitchen, focused on everything but what's important. Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. Martha's cleaning the dishes, cooking the food, and the world and the religious church would applaud that. Well, she's taking responsibility, bless God. Well, somebody's got to do the dishes. Somebody's got to cook. Somebody's got to clean. Praise you, Martha. You're a good woman. But she gets indignant because Mary ain't helping her. Where do we find Mary? In the living room, on the floor, at Jesus' feet, listening to what He's saying to her. And what does Jesus, when Jesus seen that she was becoming indignant, He said, she's starting on her. Like religious people do to me. When they see my freedom, they don't like it. And they start browbeating me over grace, over faith. Because I'm not out there fasting like they are. I don't have the 24-hour house of prayer, and I'm praying every single night for 3 or 4 hours. And they're laboring, and I'm getting it for free. So they become indignant with me, and she become indignant with Mary. The slaves always persecute the free. Law always persecutes grace. They don't go together. It's like oil and water. It doesn't mix. So He says to her, what'd you say? Leave her alone. And then He says, she has chosen One thing? Is that what it is? What is it? A good thing? But she's chosen to focus on Him and the words that come out of His mouth. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing the words that proceed out of the mouth of Christ. So all you're going to get out of the mouth of God, I'm sorry, you're not going to believe this, but I've just proved to you in Scripture, God only works through faith, grace, and promise. All you're going to get out of God's mouth is promises. You get a law from God, you're hearing another spirit. I told you, God will only bring things into your life by Romans 4:16. Faith, grace, promise. He gets things done by giving you promises to believe, not works, not laws to work. So what I want to leave you with this. And Zach, you should come on up and start playing. Here's what I want to leave you with. Start seeking God with a hearing ear, because you're not going to get it from a book. You're not even going to get it from the Bible. The Bible's not going to tell you who to marry. Is the Bible going to tell you who to marry? The Bible's not going to tell you what job to get. The Bible's not going to tell you what house to buy. The Bible's not going to tell you what car to buy. Those things are only going to be found out by you hearing the Spirit speak to you, and He's going to give it to you by promise. So He points out a house, He's going to make it happen. He points out a spouse, He's going to make it happen. At least you'll know what to start believing for. And you may not get the house overnight, you may not get the spouse overnight, but at least you can start believing for it and know that it's going to come to you by promise, not you working hard for God, and then finally you pass the grade, you pass the test, and now you can have this thing. It's not promise then. Promise means, if I say I promise you I'm going to do something, is it contingent on you to do anything? Except one thing, get your hands off of it and let me do it. I will develop. That's why it's going to take the rest of the year, because I'm going to take my time and I'm going to enjoy this one. This is a series I am going to enjoy because it's life, it's liberty, it's freedom, and it's God doing it all. But it's going to be I'm going to get persecuted for it, because when I take law away from people, they get mad. I mean, can you imagine the Celebrate Recovery people I took that away from? Now they don't know what the hell to do. All they're left with is their addiction. They've been fighting. I take away law, then these people don't know how to get rich, because that takes away that seed message. Sow a seed and get something from God. That takes that away. I'm gonna make everybody mad. And you think, well, then you're wrong. No, Paul says all have forsaken me. Read it in 2 Timothy. The man who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, law, Jesus, in John chapter 6, verse 66, said that when He taught them this teaching, this revelation, it says many of His disciples no longer followed Him. So much so that He saw the looks on His 12 and said, you want to go too? Because there's the door. Because I ain't changing truth just to appease you people. Because there's the door. So Jesus was willing to let the 12 walk. And Paul said, I will let you all walk. All have forsaken me. Because nobody wants to give up law. A system where they can put their fingers on and use self-effort and boast of, I did this, I did that, I went to the meetings, I worked the program, I worked the Word and the Word worked. They have means to boast. But Romans 3:27 says there's no boasting. Why? Because it's a faith. That's why there's no boast. If I can boast, I ain't in faith. Either He gets all the glory or I want to share a little bit. Oh, if I could have Ishmael before me, Abraham said. I'll take Isaac, but let me have Ishmael too. No, because that's a work of your flesh. You find that in Galatians 4 and in Genesis. This is why the life of Abraham is so important. Let's go back. Romans 4:16. Faith, grace, promise. And how am I going to understand those three things? By studying the life of Abraham, which we're going to do the rest of this year. God bless you. See you next week.